Welcome to this brief webinar about CO2 pricing and public procurement. We organized it because it's a topic of interest, at least, maybe of concern. We'll get to that later. My name is Johan Prummel. I'll be your host, your moderator for the next hour. I work for Rijkswaterstaat, the operational agency of our ministry concerning implementation of circular economy. And I'm an international advisor on that, including how to use procurement to stimulate circularity. The webinar is organized by Urban Agenda, the partnership for, I think, if I say it correctly, innovative and sustainable public procurement or something. It's a very long name, but I used to call it just Urban Agenda. For me, that's okay. Basically facilitated by the city of Haarlem and ACR Plus with regards to CPRON, which is the circular procurement network that we set up and are hosting for close to 2 years now. It's meant to be, the webinar is meant to be a brief, let's say first, maybe not first, but a brief introduction to this topic. So any suggestions that you might have during the webinar for follow-up are welcome. Please use the chat box for that. Also use the chat box for your questions and remarks. You'll have the agenda in front of you. It's a very basic and simple agenda. I do this introduction and I'm nearly finished. Then Sander Lubbenhuis will present about calculation to pricing and how governments give carbon a place in their work. Then Jeroen van Alphen will also present how the Dutch Rijkswaterstaat is using CO2 pricing. And then we'll have a brief interactive Q&A session where, as I said, if you have any questions, put them in the chat and we'll try to address most of these questions to the speakers. Any questions that are not answered will be answered later by email. At least that's a promise for you from Jeroen. So I'll guess that Sander will do the same. Last remark, this webinar is recorded. That's already on. So if you have any problem with being visible, keep your camera off. If you have any problem with recordings of what you're saying, don't say anything and keep your microphone off. And just listen in because it will be interesting anyway. Around 3 o'clock we'll wrap up and see what came out of it, if you had an interesting discussion and if it's an invitation for a next webinar repetition or a topic. Like I said, leave them in the chat box. That's it for me. Welcome again. I hope you'll enjoy this hour. And let's go to the first speaker. Sander, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Welcome everybody. Put on my camera so you can see me a little bit. Welcome everybody. Yeah, this is the first part of me. Now, first to say a warm welcome. At least thank you, John, for the introduction. And I'm pretty pleased to share with you the findings in my report from insight to trade-off. At the end of the presentation, there will be a QR code link where you can use your phone and you can download the report if you want more insights or if it's important to know more about it. You can read it over there. For the start, for decades, we have managed our projects and policies using 3 main buttons: money, risk, and planning. And everybody knows that. These have always been a classic tool, and we use them to make all of our decisions. In the world, CO2 was mostly a side note, something we would measure or report on after a big decision where the decisions were already made. But at the end of the project, we didn't mention it anymore. We just did some calculations, and that was it. But today, we are seeing a major shift. We are moving from insight to trade-off, bringing CO2 to the very heart of our new choose of path. It's becoming a language. We use the weight. We use it to weigh our options and justify our choices before we even begin. And that's a very important insight. However, this shift is also brought a lot of confusion, even though everyone is using the same unit, say CO2, euros per ton CO2 equivalent. It feels like if we are speaking a different CO2 language. Now, in this webinar, or in this hour, I want to be your interpreter. I want here to help you to understand these different CO2 dialects, because once we understand the logic behind the numbers, the confusion disappears and we can start making better, more transparent choices. And this is very, very important, because the unit is the unit is identical everywhere, but the meaning differs completely. You see, on the one side, you see the three different prices for 1 ton of CO2. You see 875 euros from the province of Utrecht, 267, 67, sorry, euros for the project, for the project in the province of North Holland, and 100 euros for the water authorities. They use that. It looks confusing, and people often ask which price is the correct one. Is there a correct one? But the key is understanding, and the key to understanding is pretty simple. The meaning of the price depends entirely on which question you are trying to answer. And the question is, stop asking what is the right price. Start asking what is the question we want to try to answer with the CO2 pricing. The CO2 pricing is, you need it for something else. It's not the price it says at all. It's not a single number, it's a tool. And not like any tool, we use it differently depending on our goal. And I want to show you the different goals and the different angles to how it now is used at least in the Netherlands. Now, which question is, of course, is central to your decision? To bring clarity to this, we use the framework we call the prism. I just call it a prism, because it deflects all the choices you can make. It has 4 lines of thinking. First, the policy line looks at the long-term damage to the society. The second line is the prevention line. It calculates the actual costs to reduce emission in a specific project. The third, internal, I call it steering, but it is also decision-making. How can you steer in your own organization, or what do you want? Make your choices. The internal steering creates a consistent rule for all investments decisions. And finally, the external steering uses incentives to encourage the market to work more sustainable. Excuse me. There are 2 lines, 2 foundations. Behind these 4 lines, there are 2 fundamental approaches. On the left, we have valuing. This is the policy line. Here you should think of the damage, emissions, costs to our world. It's like the moral compass for bigger strategic questions. For example, if we build a new highway instead of a train lane, how much future damage like floods, heat waves, or crop failure are we actually causing by making that choice? It could be that the highway, building a highway is more damaging than building a train road. This kind of decision making, it helps leaders justify a greener strategy because the long-term bill for society becomes visible. On the right, we have avoiding, the prevention line. This is all about the costs of taking action in the real project. If you already decided to build a train or just the highway. It gives you the practical guidance to the people doing the work, the designers and engineers who needs to compare options. For example, if I use sustainable asphalt instead of the standard kind of asphalt that you normally use, is how much extra does this cost the project does it cost me or the municipality per ton, and how much CO2 does it save? It helps project teams to spend their budget where they get the most green result for every euro they invest. Dus in short, value asks, what is the damage, while avoiding asks, what does it cost to prevent it right now? So it's a clear line. Now that has to work. Okay. And the policy line asks, what value does society place on climate damage? What we call this the social cost of carbon. It captures long-term effects that are often hidden, like floods, drought, and the health risk, what I already mentioned. It's a framework for leaders to set directions and not a technical standard for small project deals. And if you want to see how that works, there are different case studies I inspected, and I wrote it down in the report, but these case studies, how this works. The province of Utrecht puts a price tag of €875 on every ton of CO2. Why? Because climate damage costs social real money. Think of the floods, what I also talked about. By making these hidden costs visible, you make smarter decisions. For example, a green design costs €1 million extra, but avoids 2.9 million in climate damage. The choices become very easy. The green option is actually the smarter call for society. By the way, the price of €875 is a bare minimum at this moment. The current number is closer to €1,100 nowadays. So expect this price will go up in a few months from now. The internal steering, the consistency is very important. Now, to know how do we manage this with our own organization. Without clear rules, we run into a problem. Every project team has to figure out the value of their CO2 of themselves. That leads to confusion. The solution is internal steering, what I already mentioned. We agree on a fixed internal shadow price. It's not a fine or it's not real money it's paid. It's a yardstick, so to speak, for our business cases. It ensures that green design has a fair chance against a cheap design in every calculation. And Jeroen will also come to this subject after my presentation. There are different case studies. For instance, in Amsterdam and the water boards, to see the real world, look at Amsterdam. They use a price of €484. This changed the math. And more expensively designed can actually win if the CO2 impact is much lower. The water board uses the same logic for dikes with a price between €100 and €150. By adding these fictitious costs, CO2 costs, the same sustainability alternative becomes the most financial, rational choice to approve. And it's more, you can see this more in the procurement phase also. The prevention line, exactly the actual cost, you can see more in the weight scale, the higher cost, the lower cost, is how can you have their handle for that. This is for the project teams instead of a fixed target. It asks, if you choose a different option, how much extra does it cost to save 1 ton of CO2? This helps teams direct their budget to where they get the greatest CO2 reduction for every euro they spend. Also, in my behalf, it's very difficult to bring it to the other side in your own organization to people to understand that. There are 2 organizations that I want to light up: North Holland, the province of North Holland, and Enschede. 2 examples. In the province of North Holland, they have a list of solutions, like 35, I think, like sustainable asphalt. If a solution costs less than €400 per ton, CO2 reduction, it will be applied immediately. No debate, and it will apply to just, this is it. It is below the threshold, so we do this. It's so simple as that. It's very interesting. Enschede instead is CO2 data. They build their own calculation tool. CO2 data is built directly into the designer software. Where a cost designer opens a project, they see the budget of the project, a roundabout, for instance, and actually the price of the roundabout. And behind the price, you see the amount of CO2 that is emitting with building that roundabout. And then you can make also a choice, because if you calculate it, you can see CO2 then as a sort of kind of currency that you can compare with. The last step in this, the whole thing, is then the external steering, is the market. How can we involve the market with this? We talk of there's more the suppliers. We are and then we use the CO2 performance ladder. This does put a direct price on emissions, but it doesn't put a direct price on the emissions, but it gives a fictional discount to companies that actively reduce their footprint. This allows a sustainable provider to win a contract, even if their price is slightly higher than their competitors. Now, this slide is giving you the bigger picture. And I want to spend a moment here because it brings everything together. The key lesson is to use the right tool at the right time. As you can see, the role of CO2 changes during the project. In the exploration phase, in the beginning, we use the policy line to set our vision and our goals. When we move to the initiative and the design phase, we switch to the internal steering and the prevention line to compare the concrete design variance. Now, during the tender phase, we focus on the market using the external steering, like the CO2 presentation, CO2 ladder. Finally, during the realization, we can use monitoring and to ensure we hit our targets. Success is about using the different CO2 dialects consistently throughout the entire process. So do not just pick one. Perhaps you can do that for the first time, but oversee the whole picture. The conclusion is here, from insight to trade-off. The search for one single correct CO2 price is an illusion. Success lies in knowing which tool to use and when. Please remember, first, be explicit about your goals. Second, build a learning system where project data flows back to the organization so you can see better your goals. And third, use CO2 pricing as a shared language to balance our financial and social values and learning by doing. And we now know and we now understand the logic behind the numbers. We know that the value of CO2 isn't one fixed thing. It depends entirely on the question we are asking. But the most important step is that what happens next, execution. How do we actually embed this logic into our own public procurement or hard contracts on our physical construction? You might have noticed that I haven't mentioned Rijkswaterstaat at this moment and in one of these examples. This was intentional because I wanted to save them for the final bridge between theory and practice. They are going to explain exactly how this CO2 pricing is handled within their organization. But before I go, I want you to mention that there is a report. The report I mentioned. I have the QR code here in the screen. If you want a report, you can also find it on the website from the Klimaatverbond. And if you want to scan it, and if you miss the scan or there is something wrong with the scan, leave a comment in the chat, and we'll send it to you. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Sander. That was interesting. A lot of information in 15 minutes. I'm glad you made it in the 15 minutes, by the way. That is, in the same time, a challenge for Jeroen now, because he also has more or less 15 minutes. As Sander said, Jeroen will talk from the more practical Rijkswaterstaat perspective. And I leave it to Jeroen to also introduce himself and Rijkswaterstaat as an infrastructure company. Jeroen, you have your own 15 minutes now.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Sander, for the kickoff for this meeting. Just to make sure you can see my presentation.
Yes, we can see it.
Yes.
Perfect. Yes, just make sure. So my name is Jeroen van Alphen. I'm working at Rijkswaterstaat, and Rijkswaterstaat is part of the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management in the Netherlands. And Rijkswaterstaat is mainly building, maintaining all the big highways and waterways in the Netherlands. And I myself, I'm not working at the procurement part of Rijkswaterstaat, but the advisory part of Rijkswaterstaat. But I can tell you something about how we use sustainability in our projects. There's also a lot of information not directly CO2 or carbon related, but it's all, I see it as a whole. So I have to take you quickly through it to make the story complete. To start, sustainable public procurement or procurement in general doesn't start with a P in my opinion, meaning that procurement should be the last part of your of the stage, and it always starts with refuse, reduce. Start thinking what do you want to buy, why do you want to buy it. Also, as Sander has told you, you might make different choices when you include carbon reductions in your projects. Maybe you won't do it at all if you know it's really going to be expensive, not in a financial way, but in an environmental way. At Rijkswaterstaat, we try to do so by using functional specification. We try to monetize the environmental impact. Also using the carbon price or the carbon emission price with the environmental cost indicator. I'll tell you something, best price quality ratio, also the CO2 performance ladder, and the way we all calculate it when we use dual calc. So first of all, at Rijkswaterstaat, there's a difference between what we want and what we need. For instance, we need to get from one side to the river to the other side, but we didn't per se want a tunnel or a bridge or something else. We just want to cross the river, and therefore we purchase and procure using functional specifications. We say we want to go from one end to the other. Of course, we have some conditions about how many cars maybe should cross the river in an hour. But the design and the solution is actually up to the contracting company. Decisions we make, it's all life cycle costing and total cost of ownership. And we sometimes use different types of contracting, so we don't totally write down what we need. We have design and construct contracts where we ask the company to design and construct the project we want. And sometimes we use design, build, finance, maintain, and sometimes even operate contracts. Which leads to interesting new ideas, which we would never have come up when we have thought of it ourselves. The picture you see in the screen is a tunnel in the Netherlands. And as you can see, the asphalt is not black, but it's gray. There's some white material added. And that's because it's a design, build, finance, maintain contract, which means the contractor has to maintain this tunnel for the next 30 years. And they also have to pay the electricity bill for the next 30 years. By using light gray asphalt, it reflects more light, so there's less light needed in the ceiling. So in over 30 years, it saves a lot of money on the electricity bill, which can be used to make the asphalt light gray. So it's another type of construction where you ask a different question. When we select a tender, we use best price quality ratio, and it's a selection of tender based on a combination of price and quality. Like Sander also said, we used to focus mainly on money and planning. budget risks. These are still part of the best quality ratio, but we also added sustainability as one of the criteria. And of course, these criteria must be able to show differences in quality, be easy to understand, and create competition between the two tenders. And therefore, we use two types of instruments: the CO2 performance ladder and dual calc. And to quickly, as background information, this is how our best price quality ratio looks like. We make our own reference at start. So we think this project would cost us about 3.5 million euros. We put it on the market. There are 4 tenders. The first one has a really low price. But as you can see, it didn't score so much on quality. They didn't get so much points for the quality. They could earn 500,000 for sustainability for this, for instance. In this case, but it only scores 150,000 euros. So they didn't score so well, but they are really cheap. Next one's also pretty cheap. Tender 4 is really expensive, but they really came up with a good plan with really high quality. But they're also the most expensive one. So you can see number 3, they weren't the lowest price, they weren't the highest price, they didn't have the best quality, and definitely not the worst. So best price quality ratio in this case, number 3 is the winner. And that's something else than when you just ask on lowest price, but then you would have end up in tender number 1 delivering you the poor quality, and you probably wouldn't be so happy about this during your project. So you can get a fictive discount. In this case, the 4 blocks at the top, and one of them is the CO2 performance ladder. We can have a separate meeting, I think, about CO2 performance ladder, because it's a really interesting project where companies can try to get a certificate on a certain level of the performance ladder. Meaning, if you on the first ladder, you do something about reduction of carbon emission in your own organization, you are aware where it is. You sort of made the basic steps. Then you're able to get 5% discount. When you're on the second level, you don't only reduce carbon in your own organization, but you use it in your supply chain. So you're looking at your biggest suppliers, where's their carbon emissions, how can we reduce that? How can you have the conversation together? Where can you make easy steps to reduce carbon? So when you have a certificate on the second ladder, you can get up to 10% fictive discount. And when you have measures taken, so you can be zero carbon in 2050, you can get, for instance, 15% fictive discount in your tender. And once again, fictive discount doesn't mean a real discount. You still get paid the money you have, your offered price, but you get awarded for less than you have offered. So that's on company level mainly, but then we also have on project level. And then when you use functional specification and leave it up to the market, you get discussions like this. There's a project somewhere in the Netherlands. There has to be a new road, so we need new asphalt. There's one company A. They offer us low temperature asphalt, but they are 50 kilometers away, which in the Netherlands is already really far. Contractor B has a high percentage of recycled concrete, recycled content. There's one who has a different production type with less asphalt. There's a really interesting one with low temperature asphalt and 50% recycled content, but it's really far away. So how can you compare these in your tender? And how can you give the best quality, the highest price? Well, to calculate it, we have created a tool. It's called dual calc. It's I don't know how long we're already using it, but I think it's more than 10 years. And duurbekalk means in Dutch duurzaam bouwen calculator, and in English it's sustainable construction calculator, which is actually a software tool to measure the sustainability of a project in an objective and standardized manner, to be used as an award criterion in a procurement process. And so duurbekalk calculates the environmental impact of the different infrastructure designs based on material and energy use during the whole life cycle. And this is called the environmental cost indicator. And the environmental cost indicator, I'll get back to it later, but it's a one-digit indicator of the sustainable impact of a project. To create this environmental cost indicator, we use life cycle analysis. So for all different types of projects, there's an LCA, and duurbekalk actually uses the LCAs to calculate the environmental cost indicator. It's an objective comparison between tenders, and we use an LCA instrument to judge the bid. So, and how does it look like in practice? You have a life cycle analysis, and in the beginning, the production phase, you see the different types of products we're using, and for every different type of product, you can create an LCA, life cycle analysis. So different types of concrete, different types of the asphalt, steel, for instance. In the production phase, you can say what's the carbon emission and a lot of other indicators in the production phase. But we also use the building phase. How does it get to the scene? Where you can use it? How is it used? How is it maintained? How can you demolish it again in the end of life cycle? And how can you renew in the end everything what's used in the project in a new project? So this altogether is a calculation in duurbekalk. And actually, what duurbekalk does is it's actually a pretty simple calculator. It says there's a specific type of material, specific type of asphalt, and it just multiplies this specific environmental cost indicator of this specific type of asphalt with the amount of asphalt you're using. So you might use a few tons of one type of concrete, a few tons of asphalt, and duurbekalk just multiplies every amount of material with the environmental cost indicator of every product. And we use them, and all these products, they're in the national building database, where we store all these different cost indicators of every different material. Why? Well, every activity or everything we build causes emissions, and it leads to damage. Damage to air, water, soil. Sander also told you something about it, and it leads to some kind of damage. So it's a human health or to the ecosystems, resource availability, a lot of different rates of damage which are caused by everything we use and produce. So then again, when you look at the LCA of a product, we have at this moment 19 different impact categories, where, as you can see, global warming is one of them. So carbon emission is one of the 19 impact categories which we use to calculate the LCA, and with the LCAs we use the environmental cost indicator. And here you can see how it all connects global warming to the damage pathways and to what damage it does to the human ecosystem or resource availability. I said it's one of them, global warming, so the carbon emission. But you see in infrastructure projects that the CO2 component is about 50% of the total project emission. So environmental cost indicator. So about 50% is based on CO2 emissions. And for all these 19 different indicators, we have a environmental price. So again, where Sander mentioned, you can use it for your internal calculation. You have these different prices of 875 and I forgot the other one, 448. In this case, for climate change, for the carbon emissions, we use at this moment 130 euros per ton. And like I said, it's in infrastructure projects. It's about half of the impact is caused by carbon emissions. And this figure every now and then we will update this figure, seeing if this 130 euros per ton is still can we still use it at this moment. But you can also see ozone layer depletion or acidification. It's all, there's environmental prices attached to it. So sometimes you can score really good on climate change, so lower carbon emissions, but it might increase freshwater damage or something to one of the other components. So then in practice, like I said, Dubocalc, it's actually a sort of smart Excel file. You can add all your different materials you want and the amount of materials you want, and it just starts calculating. So it's in this case you have there's a lot of asphalt in this. Your specific type of asphalt you can add to it. The amounts of asphalt you're using, you add to it. And then this way you can calculate your entire project, which is interesting because when you have it clear where the impact is, you can start using Dubocalc and start playing with it actually, because you can start optimizing your process, maybe make different building procedures, different types of materials, more material from one type of material, less material for the other one. And when you start playing with it, you can see how you get to the lowest environmental cost indicator. And again, the lowest environmental cost indicator is in our case best awarded in our best price quality ratio. So you can use it as an optimizing instrument. We can also use it as a minimum performance requirement. And all set combined in a real project. This is actually an older project, but I think it's really interesting. This is a highway in the Netherlands, and we tendered it with best price quality ratio, with functional specifications, using Dubocalc and using the CO2 performance ladder. And we came up with a winner with a really low environmental cost indicator. And what they did, they used smart transportation solutions. So you see it's next to the water, so they did a lot of transport over water and not over land. And they really redesigned the way the road is built. So they use a thicker foundation in this case, which has a low environmental cost indicator, and then a thinner layer of asphalt. And asphalt has a higher environmental cost indicator. So this way, their total environmental cost indicator was lower. The highway creates its own energy. There's a lot of use of recycled materials, and they also added some new materials to it, which were not in the database yet, but they've added to it, and then it also yield to their low environmental cost indicator. Like I said, it's an older project, but a few years ago, we won a Procure Plus award for the tender procedure of the year. Which thinks it indicates how it works in practice, and not only in small pilot projects, but also in real big highway projects in the Netherlands.
Jeroen, sorry to interrupt, but
yes, are 15 minutes over?
You're more or less out of time. I know you have some slides to go, so could you please speed up a bit?
I don't have a timer in my screen, so that would help, I think. And also to make it easier, because you cannot ask this big calculations from everyone. We have sort of next steps, maximum environmental cost indicator for every a project type. So then we don't have the time to calculate. You can just ask for the maximum environmental cost indicator values in your tender, and as you can see here, these maximum environmental cost indicators, they will also decrease over time. And that is next to all the measures we're taking directly to reduce carbon emissions. So this is the way we use carbon pricing in our procurement, but we also use direct CO2 reducing measures like Rejuvenate cream, for instance, on asphalt. And because it works pretty good, we are looking now how we can make it mandatory in the Netherlands in infrastructure projects in 2027. So basic for on material level, so every material we use has a maximum environmental cost indicator, and also a mandatory for as a award criterion for bigger projects. Just in short, this is how it looks like. All the smaller projects, you ask on material level, maximum environmental cost indicators, and above a level which has to be determined, I think it's 5 million. We use environmental cost indicator as a award criterion in bigger projects. I think that was my last slide.
Great. Thank you, Jeroen. Thank you both, gentlemen, for great presentations. Again, a lot of information in too little time, I guess. Like Jeroen said, only on CO2 ladder, performance ladder, we can elaborate for a whole week, I guess. There's a lot to say about everything. So now we move on to the other part of this webinar, which is a Q&A session. And I have seen some questions in the chat. I don't know, but someone is also already responding in the chat box, so that's good. I have maybe a more generic question for both of you, because both your stories with a different angle, but are quite technical. Now, if I were listening to your presentations as a procurer of for a immediate municipality somewhere in Europe, and I want to buy IT equipment or furniture or whatever, is this only applicable for infrastructure projects or also for other sectors or product groups? And what if I were this procurement official? How could I use your information of this afternoon tomorrow in changing something in my procedures? Well, that's actually two big questions, but I'm curious for your response to that. Let's start with Sander, then Jeroen can take a sip of water.
Yeah, the first question is for now, it's, I think, that the civil engineering, the construction works is way ahead of other calculations of, for instance, furniture or ICT projects. You also see that concrete, asphalt, these are the main contributors for the CO2 emissions at the right moment. So if you want to do something, just pick the high yield of CO2 that you can reduce, and that is in the construction industry. And the second question, if you really want to do it, try first to understand what CO2 pricing means. It means and where you are in your project or in your organization, what kind of role you can have, and look ahead of you in your project and look behind you, and if there is anything you can change in the way you are acting in this process. If you are a procurer, your buyer, then you can change the way you can procure your project in the market. If you are a developer and designer, then you can design a much finer, nicer CO2 neutral project. So it's very important that you understand that you as a person has the influence to change anything, to change the world, for instance, in the CO2. So it starts all by you. It doesn't start with the government that says you need to do this or you need to do that. It starts with you.
Okay, thank you. And just to comment on that, or maybe second question, it starts with you as a procurer, but what if my client, my commissioner, doesn't want it? What can I do? Or at least doesn't ask for it.
I know where his house lives, so I can actually find him. No, just kidding. But it's also politics. Yes, of course. If you got a politician that is like Trump, it's woke. And then makes it hard, makes it difficult. But there's always kind of way that you can find your own influence in your own area of expertise.
I find that a very promising message. There's always something you can do. Jeroen, do you agree with that? And what's your response to the initial question?
Yeah, I think there's always something you can do. I totally agree with that. And I think well, the whole transition in this in this transition, it's also based on enthusiastic people who dare to stand up and dare to speak out. And then you see organizations slowly moving along. So yes, I believe it's you always have to ask yourself, well, how would I react as a normal person, as myself, versus how do I react in this case as an employee. Because sometimes you make right and smart decisions if you're just as a private person, and less smart decisions as an employee. So I think it's true. You also asked, is it also, can you also use it in other sectors? And I also have to agree with Sander. You have to start where is the biggest impact with the least hiccups. I think the advantage of infrastructure projects that it's never procured in like a Friday afternoon, so it's always big projects, a lot of people, a lot of expertise. So it gives you at least more time to influence what you are buying, maybe compared to I don't know, cleaning equipment or office furniture, what might be a process which is in a very shorter time. So in that case, infrastructure is a mature market where a lot happens and a lot of changes and sustainable changes have been made. So it's and if you can find another market, maybe construction, the building, that will also be possible to use it, because I think the procedures, the procedure style is also a little bit the same. It's longer projects, a longer time, so a longer time to influence. But there's a lot of data needed when you want to use an environmental cost indicator. A lot of LCAs, a lot of data before you can really use it in a mature way.
Okay, so what you both say is technically you can use these methodologies for a lot of other things, but it's intense and probably therefore also expensive. At least there are costs involved. So start using such methodologies in the high impact sectors like building and construction and or infrastructure. Let's go to the chat. Well, the last thing in the chat actually comes from Sander. You have a question for yourself, Sander? No, you were responding to someone. There are quite some technical questions, like who fixes the price for each environmental impact? Is the LCI inventory and then connected to the LCA scope, cradle to gate, cradle to grave, cradle to cradle. If any of the people in the audience want to elaborate on their question in the chat, feel free to, because you will far better explain your own question than I can if I read it out.
I can comment on the last one because I asked it.
Yeah, well,
Life
if you want to,
cycle
please.
A would be life cycle inventory, and typically this means only cradle to gate assessment. And because aside from CO2, you have also shown other environmental categories. I wonder which scope you cover. Are you able to cover even cradle to grave? Because then you need also downstream part. Are you able to cover that in that assessment, and will have the numbers referred to that scope or to cradle to gate?
I must say that there's some change in what we include in every measure. So in the life cycle analysis or the LCI, but we try to stick to, I think, for the environmental cost indicator, the 19 indirect shadow prices. We try to align them as much as possible with product environmental regulation. Sorry, product environment footprint. So it might be that there are some old indicators in my presentation, but we are trying to get them all to the new format and what you all use in the Europe standard.
Okay,
And
thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. And in DuBoCalc, there's also this module D, which is the last part. And there's also a long discussion whether you use it or whether you can use it or you cannot use it yet. And I think that's the hard part on infrastructure. It's really long-term projects. So you're talking about cradle to cradle in 60, 70, 80 or 120, 150 years. So it makes it a lot harder to close the loop when you compare to short life cycle products. It makes it, I think, easier.
Jeroen, I think it also is very important that you know what kind of CO2 price you actually want to know, what kind of goal you have to achieve. Because if you want to go to cradle to gate, then it means that you want to choose between 2 or 3 different products and with the lowest CO2 emissions. If you want to choose between one project or another project, the difference between that's more a policy question, and then you need the whole LCA calculations, including the D. So it depends on in which phase of decision making you are within the project.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would be important to maybe clarify that if slides would be shared as a follow-up, because in the presentation it was referenced the EN standard. Now in the answer it was PEF, Product Environmental Footprint, which is now undergoing revision. I think it's important to understand the method because there is no global harmonization, and because if someone decides for project A and he's comparing to supplier from outside of Europe, then he would be probably referring to another way of calculation, and then that KPI doesn't hold. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for your response, and thank you for asking the question. There must be a lot more questions to answer. Like I said, if possible, they will be answered by email. I think we have your email addresses if you're in this meeting. For now, we have to end this session, but considering the interest, we were up to 88 people in the audience at the highest point, I think.
90.
90 even. Well, you looked better than I did, son. So that means there's a lot of interest in this topic. So I think it's fair to say that we have to look into if we can set up something like a next step on CO2 pricing and procurement for those who are interested. I don't know yet how we're going to do that, but at least the 90 that we're in will be addressed with probably a question or ask for suggestions on how to move on this topic. Like I said, a lot to say. I like to end with, well, thanking Sander and Jeroen, obviously, for their presentations and answering the questions. I also like to thank City of Haarlem / Urban Agenda, Public Procurement and Innovation and Sustainability Partnership, or something like that. And obviously Asia Plus for the technical hosting, and CPRON for joining these projects and networks. Thanks everybody for listening in. I think I can close with 2 quotes that I got from our 2 speakers, and they are actually connected. And the first is, there's always something you can do. And then the other one is, change starts with the first step. So do what you at least can do and trust that your first step will actually create a movement and can create some change in your organization. Thank you all for now. Thank you for being with us, and have a nice afternoon or evening or morning, wherever you are. We will close this meeting now, and thanks again for listening in. Thanks again for speaking, and hope to see you next time.